I am the product manager of dispatch and contractor reimbursement, and I have here today who I'm going to have him introduce himself is Brad.
Hey Sarah, I'm Brad Hawkins. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Service Power. Been a part of dispatch and contractor reimbursement for a long, long time. So excited to talk about it.
I am as well, Brad. Thank you so much for being here, and let's start diving in. One of the things that we kind of wanted to talk about is let's first talk about dispatching third-party contractors. Those service providers doing work for a company around dispatching, but are not employed by the company. Why is this more important than ever? Can you talk about that with me in this industry? We know it's coming up a lot more.
Yeah, it's something that Service Power, I believe has spoken about for ages, and the industry is really just coming around to it. Because if you think of some of the issues, there are things you can do when you employ a workforce. There are some wonderful things you can do. You can have 100% control of the schedule, more efficiency. So that's great, but it's also not reality to say you can have an employee in every geography that you need because you may not be able to fill their schedule. So you have to be able to implement with independent contractors. That said, some organizations even 100% use independent contractors. So there are ways we have to understand that when I work with an independent contractor, it's a very different engagement than working with my own employee. So, that's just one reason. There's others. There's, of course, something, again, Service Power's talked about a long time, the technician shortage. It's getting harder and harder to find people whose aspirations in life are to grow up to be an HVAC technician which it shouldn't be that way. They're wonderful, fulfilling, well-paying trades that we need to get more people into. But again, it leaves you in a position where I'm going to have to use some independent contractors because I can't necessarily employ on my own. There's also things like seasonal demands. Your volumes are going to go up and down based on the season, based on the trade. So independent contractors have always been a necessity, a reality, and I'm sure as we'll talk about, how you engage with them is different, and it needs to be recognized, and there needs to be a mechanism and a platform to handle those differences.
Absolutely. And it definitely feels as if when you are employing that contracted workforce, your business efficiency and the amount of jobs you can get an increase for your company only grows in that space when you allow that into the different businesses.
Yep.
One of the things kind of wanted to jump to then right here is with that blended contracted workforce, how is traditional dispatching not really working right now for companies?
Well, right. You already touched on the first word, which is for most companies, it's a very manual process. And when you talk about independent contractors, the first problem you have to overcome is they may do work for you, but they do work for others and they do their own business. So you don't have 100% control of their calendar. And one of the issues in a manual world is you don't even have visibility of their calendar. So you have to have a way, if you want to be successful with independent contractors, you have to have a way to know in the moment, how do I get a view into their business? What's the geographies they cover? What are their skills? What's their availability? How many technicians do they have? What's the capacity of those technicians? And then overall as a business, how do they perform for you in the moment? Again, knowing I can't control them, but I can call on them when I need them with them telling me, here's what I can do for you. Here's when I'm available. The reason that's important is you kind of mentioned, as it relates to consumers. Consumers aren't going to accept anymore, hey, I have an issue. Well, go call this number. Go work it out with them. I mean, the company then is starting off with a horrible field service experience, no visibility into what's going on with the business and the consumer, no idea if they're being taken care of properly. And you're just leaving a consumer on their own. So you've got to have a platform that links all of that together, because myself as a consumer, I have my own repair events that go on in my house. I want to either go to a website and say, give me an appointment and get back. Again, if you're using independence, I want to know who's coming to my house and when, whether that's, again, on a website, whether that's I call the call center, whoever. So that's kind of the manual problem. What used to happen historically is they would just throw a job over the fence. Some people call that spray and pray. Some people used to call that fax and pray. But it's, hey, I have a consumer with an issue, throw the job over, and hey, servicer, I hope you go fix it. and I'll hear from you when it's time to get paid. And hopefully it went well. That just does not work in 2025. It hasn't worked for a while. And again, we feel like Service Power, we're an organization that recognizes the different way that you engage with that third party to be able to have full visibility into their business and put them in a position to be successful with that consumer so that you as a client are successful.
Absolutely. I mean, consumers really want to see all the transparency these days, right? Like you need all of that information, all of that availability, all of that time and checking in. So completely makes sense. In going into that, can we talk about how Service Power is the better approach? Talk to me about that. How is it really beating that traditional dispatching?
Right. So there's a number of things that go into play there. We just talked about like that view and transparency into the service business. I have to know where they work, when they work, what are they willing to offer for appointments. One of the keys to that, though, is I have full transparency then throughout the service event. So I'm getting statuses back along the way. That service business is en route. They're on site. I can get a view into who is that technician and what do I know about that technician. Part of that is so that we can evaluate, after the repairs are done, how is that servicer performing for me as a client? They're running a percentage of jobs for me. Are they giving me a solid first time fix rate? Are they honoring every appointment I do? I, as a client, should expect that I have certain parameters that I'm measuring my network on. And as I'm measuring them, as I build out a network of independent contractors, I may in certain geographies have 3 eligible service providers or 5. How do I know which is the right one to use? So that's where we talk about things like rankings. And I can understand like, these are the 5 that are eligible. They're all offering up appointments. Which should I choose to ensure the best outcome? We also want to ensure that our platform is driving that servicer behavior. That's the kind of things that the rankings do. They get the network to behave and act in a way that's pleasing to me as the client to ensure that my end consumer is being taken care of properly.
Makes a ton of sense. One thing I'm going to kind of lean into is I do have a question. Why not just have servicers bid on a job? Why not just have bidding as, on a platform? If you could talk about that.
Yep. That's a great question. And that again goes to Service Power's experience in the trends of field service. So back in the day, many years ago, we tried out the bidding platform. And here's what we learned. When you put a job out to bid among a network, they generally bid down to the lowest common denominator. So while you may think you may be saving on one end, well, I've got this guy who's willing to do this job super cheap. A lot of time that comes with poor quality. And it also comes with the service provider that might have cost a little bit more. He just says, I'm not getting work through this. I'm not going to bend on my rates. I'm going to move on to another place that I can get work. So what you ultimately do when you throw jobs out for bid is you cannibalize your network to an extent. And now you're left with what could end up being your poorest performing providers are left to do the work. And, it leads to some bad results from key indicators for the business. How are we doing? That was absolutely our experience and what we watched. And that was the feedback we got from service providers directly that said, I'm not going to, I will compete based on my performance, not based on telling you I'm willing to do, more for less. Those are the kind of negotiations. And here's another point that's worth bringing up. The way the system works with the Service Power platform is you're authorizing a servicer to work for you. You're typically pre-negotiating rates or even negotiating rates on the fly. You can do that in the moment, but you have some level of certainty as to when this type of repair comes up, this is going to be my cost. And like I said, I could have 5 people who I know could do that. I can make a decision that says which one of them's the best. I could use that rate as a part of my ranking system. We can actually create ranking systems that are based on multiple parameters, weight those parameters so I know what's most important. Is it cost? Is it customer satisfaction? Is it first time fix rate? Whatever those are, client gets to decide and set that up. But it's all about ensuring what in that moment is the best option to get the best experience for that consumer.
putting that it's putting those KPIs back in the hands of the client. So knowing what they need for their business to kind of grow and efficient and track, it's just very smart and
Well, and it's a huge
super helpful.
differentiator again of the Service Power platform. We have our opinions on what
Yes.
KPIs you should be looking at. And generally in the industry, there's some standards, but we do have clients that come to us. We had a client, just as an example, that said, what if I wanted to use the Better Business Bureau rating as one of my parameters? We were able to use it. We said, as long as we can get access to the data,
Yep.
we can create a ranking parameter out of it. So they had that as a ranking parameter, weighted with their percentage. And, I mean, again, it was their request. We didn't, any client could choose to use that now. But the point there is you can really rank based on any piece of data, whatever you want. And that's a huge differentiator.
Awesome. That's a great story. Thank you for explaining all about that in the bidding. Moving on to contractor reimbursement. Let's move on to these contractors and learn a little bit about this. Talk to me of just kind of the background challenges for the business in this space and what we're kind of going into, some of those solutions. But first, let's talk about the challenges.
Yep. So contractor reimbursement was, I'll give the little quick history lesson of why it came about. It was typical in the OEM industry, anywhere where repairs were happening or service was happening, and I now have to pay that independent contractor. And way back in the day, what they used to do was I'd go out and run the job, and I would fill out my piece of paper, and I would mail it off to whoever's supposed to pay me. They would get it, and they would redline it and go, well, you didn't give me this piece of information or that piece of information, and they would mail it back to them. And that service would go, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to do this, and they would make a correction, and they would mail it back to who's supposed to pay them. Long story short, that used to take on average about 60 days to get a service provider paid. You want to make service providers successful. They talk about the 2 Ps. One of them relevant to this discussion is you make sure they're paid in a timely manner and you make sure they have access to parts. So that's, 60 days, cash flow problems. That's not good. So the challenge to overcome is how can I just enact those rules? Whatever those rules are, every client wants some amount of information provided back of what did you do? What repair did you do? What parts did you use? Give me a description. Give me some repair codes or fault codes, or it can be any number of pieces of data. But I want to ensure that not only am I positioning myself to execute those rules, I want to pay that contractor in a timely fashion, and I also want to make sure I'm not paying him a penny more or a penny less than what we agreed for that job. So, because that's a big issue in the past of you would have things like fraud. If you're not detecting for, wait a minute, you sent us this claim a week ago. Why are you asking for it again? There's one of our clients who has a rule that says we're going to repair an appliance 3 times. That's it. So they have a 3 and done rule, and you need a system that can detect that immediately. So we call it contractor reimbursement, but I will say it's about ensuring you're collecting the data you need, ensuring you're paying in a timely fashion, ensuring you're detecting for fraud. Like there's numerous things that it does.
And all that history just for what the servicer did and everything involved with it, that's only helpful for the consumer, right? They come back, something didn't work, you have all that information there. So huge
Absolutely.
benefit.
And you can use that information. You can use that post-repair information to dictate what happens if I'm going out, again, that 3 and done rule. I'll know the second time I go out, here's everything that happened in the past. We have all that. Sometimes we know a service provider goes out and an issue comes up 30 days later. Well, it's warranted, so he's going to go out. He's not going to be paid labor because labor is warranted because you just did a repair 20 days ago. Again, imagine a world where you do not have a validation engine checking all of that literally in the moment. Like it is real time. It's time for me to get paid. Here's my information. You get a real time response that says, no, you need to do this. You need to provide this, or yep, you're good to go. You can be paid. And that comes down to our clients who typically they choose to, we're going to pay our networks once a week, but we have examples of clients who pay daily. So we can even support that.
Incredible. So some typical solutions to these challenges in the past, has there been, what has been out there outside of Service Power? And then we can kind of talk about our solution. But what are some solutions that people have tried to kind of solve this contractor reimbursement challenge?
Well, I think, I'm going to be a little cocky here about Service Power because Are there other organizations paying contractors? Sure. And are they, the problem is, are they trying to do that by building that over the top of their accounting systems? Because usually it's the finance department that's concerned with, well, I've got you listed as a payable, so I'm going to cut you a check. Nobody out there has the depth of rules and validations that we can enact, and then our ability to communicate with those accounting systems. Again, one of our clients, we're taking in the claim, we're adjudicating it in real time, we're giving a response of whether it's good to go or not good to go. And when it is good, we're communicating with their accounting system. We're even identifying the GL bucket that that particular claim resides in. We're doing all of that in real time. Nobody's doing it like ServicePower does. And, what I would, for those that are listening to this webinar, when you talk about contractor reimbursement, I hope you're taking everything that's said here and going beyond just the idea of payments, because there's so much more. And again, it's ensuring I'm not just paying people, but am I paying them what I've agreed to? And am I ensuring I'm not double paying them? Am I somehow paying them less? Or something, Sarah, that we've been working with multiple clients on, something we already support. What if I have to split payments? What if there's a scenario where I pay the contractor, but I also have to strip and pay the parts distributor? We support that. So no one has the depth of what we do in our contractor reimbursement platform.
Absolutely. I think even talking about, parts ordering alone, that piece is also another really fascinating piece, that's from the tracking to making sure you're getting it when it's delivered. I think all of that also kind of combines into that contractor reimbursement that, as you said, is just outside of, think beyond the payment.
Yeah, and I think this is a comment I just made at a conference I was just at. We're more than a platform. We're an ecosystem. So when you think about what we've brought together, clients, right? So the distributor of jobs, service networks who have to go run the jobs, parts distributors to ensure that we have a direct line in the moment I need to order a part, and ensuring I'm getting the right parts. When it comes time to pay, ensuring all of those entities are getting paid. There's even so much more to that workforce that I won't get into now when you talk about workforce connectors and everything, but we've created beyond a platform. It's an ecosystem that we can ensure we're directing who's the right person to go, starting with the dispatch thing we talked about.
Yeah.
Do they have access to parts? That's part of the ecosystem. Are they getting paid correctly? That's contractor reimbursement. The depth is unparalleled.
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit about the typical solutions, the challenges, but you did talk a little bit about ServicePower. Anything else to add in regards to the ServicePower solution? Just kind of wrap up that thought or anything.
Yeah, as a wrap up, I guess what my thoughts would be is, this is what I would encourage those who are listening to this to do, is when you're working with contractors and you're evaluating who might be the best solution for you, ask them, how do you do that? How does your software handle employed versus independent? Because our experience is, what most of them say is, well, you just treat them like they're your own. You hear the phrase, put them on the Gantt, which again, if you're familiar with field service, most have a typical, in an employed world, you have a Gantt chart that's following each of your resources throughout the day. And again, we recognize that you don't have 100% control of that independent contractor. So there's a level of transparency you need, and the way you get that information is different, and the way you rate them to ensure they're the right one is different. And I would encourage anyone listening to this, those are the type of questions you need to be asking. Because if you're hearing like, to us, we're going to put them all in the same way, they're all the same. Well, no, they're not. Because again, you're going to find that independent's working, probably if he's working for you, he's working for 10 other organizations. And he's also doing his own work, right? He's getting calls directly from consumers. So that's what I would wrap up with, is be willing to ask those questions, and don't accept the idea that, well, we just treat them the same, because they are not the same. That's the big differentiator of the ServicePower platform. We understand the challenges of the two. The last thing I'll add is, in understanding those challenges, we also know how to do it in a way that gives that singular world-class experience to the end consumer. They don't care if the guy who showed up at their house is employed or he's an independent business. They care that it was fixed and it was done right.
Yes.
That's all they care about. So that's the principle of our platform is understand those two business models, but make it one singular world-class experience.
Thank you so much for your time, Brad. Really appreciate you jumping on and speaking to me about this, and looking forward to having people ask more questions about Service Power and learn more about it.